it's his election to lose. I can't think of anything much he would do tonight which would change that. What he can do is reassure Americans that what we're going to see is something which won't resemble an extreme right-wing party, but will represent a party looking out for ordinary Americans.
Donald Trump's going to be speaking at the RNC. It's the first time we'll hear from him in the wake of the attempt to assassinate him at a rally last weekend. And after that attack, he called for unity and told journalists he'd rewritten his barnstormer of a speech. In 2016, he made law and order a huge theme in the wake of the killings of 5 police officers in Dallas. Let's remind ourselves.
Americans watching this address tonight have seen the recent images of violence in our streets and the chaos in our communities. Many have witnessed this violence personally. Some have even been its victims. I have a message for all of you. The crime and violence that today afflicts our nation will soon, and I mean very soon, come to an end.
Well, we're joined now by the man that co-wrote that speech, Dr. Frank Buckley. He's a foundation professor at George Mason University School of Law. Dr. Buckley, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I must say I'm not a doctor. My daughter is, but I'm not.
Oh, well, you can borrow her credentials for this evening if you like. I won't tell anyone, but thank you for putting that right. If you were writing this speech, how would you start? Where would you go with it?
If I were writing a speech tonight?
Yeah, the speech that Donald Trump's going to give tonight.
Well, I don't know that he would take my advice. I've worked on the campaign. I've certainly wrote speeches in 2016. I think it's important for him to try to reassure the American people that, in fact, we're not quite as crazy as one might think, that assassination attempts don't represent what Americans are all about. But yet, at the same time, he's opposing a Democratic Party, which many Americans find really very extreme indeed. And so what he's doing is, I think, appealing to the ordinary American voter, the median voter, the guy who's, goes to church on Sunday or shul on Friday, the person who is profoundly disappointed by the last couple of years of the Biden administration. Recall that, Biden was elected as an ostensible moderate. We are going to give him the keys to the car, as opposed to somebody like, the radicals of the party. But then he gave away the keys to those radicals. And what we've seen is an administration seemingly run by other people. In fact, we don't know who's in charge, right? We don't know who's running things, right? We have a sense that there's a kind of a shadow government that's been running things in place of a president who's passed his stale date. And so that's going to stop. It'll stop right quick. But what I think it won't do is it's not going to represent some kind of return to right-wing extremism. In fact, the Trump movement is better seen as a reversion to an older kind of Republican Party, right? Which with the party of Lincoln, of Teddy Roosevelt and Dwight Eisenhower, a rather more moderate party than, say, the Goldwater Party. It's a party that is very much middle of the road on economic policies, right, as opposed to the economic purity of a Ted Cruz or Barry Goldwater, and yet is conservative, fairly conservative on social issues. I mean, the convention is not going around beating up gay people, for example. It's not making a big deal out of abortion, right? It's trying to lower the rhetoric a little bit on all of that. But at the same time, there's a recognition that the Republicans are running against a party that seems to think it's okay to inflict, to castrate 10-year-old boys, against the wishes of their parents. There's that kind of craziness going on, and it needs to stop.
Yeah. Of course, we view this speech as a huge event over here on this side of the Atlantic, and it is over there as well. But given what you've just said about, or referred to, with regards to President Biden's health and the way the Democratic machine is sort of turning in on itself at the moment, how important an event is it?
Is the convention?
No,
It's
Trump's address tonight in particular, I'm thinking of the speech.
in a sense, it's not all that important in that he seems to well, he has the nomination, but also the election seemingly wrapped up. I mean, it's his election to lose. I can't think of anything much he would do tonight which would change that. What he can do is reassure Americans that what we're going to see is something which won't resemble an extreme right-wing party, but will represent a party looking out for ordinary Americans. So that's really what people want, and he'll do that. He'll do that forcefully. Remember that one of the reasons why he's been popular, why there is a Trump movement, is precisely because of the kind of toughness that we saw at the assassination attempt. I mean, Americans respond well to that, in particular at a time when those kinds of masculine virtues have been denigrated, particularly by the Democratic Party. These indeed are virtues, and they're needed if one's going to turn around the culture of government in Washington. And that's his mission. I mean, I guess what he's going to talk about will be precisely how he's going to try to do that. He's not going to say, I'm ally to some right-wingers. This is not the Heritage Foundation. But yet at the same time, he has to say, look, I have a plan to do things. Okay. And we recognize that things didn't happen in his first administration. So I think one thing he's going to want to say is it's going to be different this time. Right.
Yeah.
You're going to elect me, and I'm going to deliver in a way that I couldn't because I didn't have the personnel in the first administration. I appointed people who were not on board with what Trumpism was all about, right?
Yeah.
They were people comfortable with the status quo.
Our colleagues at the convention, Frank, are being told repeatedly by Trump supporters they believe he's been, I suppose one way of putting it is, divinely anointed. We're seeing images of people with ear coverings matching the one Trump wore following his assassination attempt. There's lots of talk about, God's hand being at work. Has the GOP become a bit of a cult?
Well, it may be so. I obviously don't see divine intervention in all of this. I see good luck, and I see a very incompetent Secret Service. It was great that he survived, and great that he displayed the kind of instant courage that he showed at the event. But was there something like a divine mission there? I think what you're seeing is an immense amount of frustration by particularly religious people, especially evangelicals, rallying behind them, and finding in him something that they don't see in any other politician. But they don't cast the median vote. The median vote in America is not cast by evangelicals. The median vote in America is cast by more moderate people, Catholics, Episcopalians, people like that. That's the key to the American election. In every election but one since 1952, the Catholic vote was a determining vote, and it's solidly in his favor at this point.
Yeah, fascinating.
So we're talking about people who are not religious extremists, who have a built-in sense of the limits of politics, and who indeed tend to swing on the moderate side when it comes to economic policies, but are socially conservative. So they're kind of, that's a sweet spot in American politics, and they're kind of the ideal Trump voter in that respect.
Yeah, let's
So,
talk. Let's talk. Sorry, Frank. Let's talk briefly about J.D. Vance, if we can, because he's attracting a great deal of attention since he was named on Trump's ticket. His
right.
speech last night, it was fairly conventional in comparison to some of his previous comments, like calling for the mass firing of civil servants and a national ban on abortion and so on. Are we going to see a similar centralizing of rhetoric through the campaign from him?
Well, I think, getting rid of, ideological civil servants who are running their own agenda in the face of the wishes of the American people is what democracy is all about. I don't see anything wrong with that. I mean, a little bit of Andrew Jackson in that respect might not be a bad thing at all. One doesn't recognize how there is something like a parallel government at work. And indeed, one saw that in the absurd Russian hoax or the Russian collusion hoax of the first Trump administration. I mean, that was just, an exercise of unfettered power by intelligence professionals who were, I think, really quite disloyal to the United States. So that will be there. In other respects, I don't think he has to, he doesn't have to provide all that much red meat when you get down to it. I mean, he doesn't have to, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But you mentioned J.D. Vance, and I think the important thing to think about Vance is that the choice of Vance was about 2028. It wasn't about 2024. Vance doesn't really bring anything to the election in 2024. I mean, to the extent that I had any advice to offer people in all of this, it was, look, if you went for somebody like the governor of my state, Youngkin, you'll reach out for a person who is popular with women, with the suburban voter, and so on. But the campaign didn't think they needed that. They thought they have the election wrapped up. What they wanted to do was to project the sense that the MAGA movement, the Trump movement, will survive in 2028, which it might not have so readily with other people as vice presidents. So
yeah.
Vance automatically becomes the lead, unless he blots his copybook incredibly, he's going to be the candidate in 2028.